My name is Frankie Juanita Shook Lester. I was born in the Bushnell Hotel in Bushnell, North Carolina before the lake took. It was a lumber town and a mining town.
Red oak was probably the hottest thing they sold, flooring. And that flooring, record shows they sold all over the United States, even to foreign countries, back in the 20s and the 30s.
We start with when Franklin Roosevelt was elected. He was elected in 1932, he took office in 1933. Roosevelt faced the Great Depression, he faced the problem of economic poverty everywhere, but for Roosevelt, the notion of a project like the Tennessee Valley Authority, which would take the resources of that area, be managed by the government and distributed to the people, really looked like a good solution to that problem. And so in May of 1933, fulfilling this idea of the New Deal and to improve the economy, Roosevelt signed the TVA Act into law. The TVA Act did a lot of things. It builds a series of hydroelectric dams on the Tennessee River. It sent in government scientists, social workers into the region to help people suffering from poverty, taught them how to farm. They sent in people who helped them up business. The dams not only control the flow of the river to prevent flooding, the dams also produced hydroelectricity that the government would then sell to the communities in the Tennessee River Valley.
When TVA came in, first they were looking for aluminum. All of this was supposed to be to help build the state, but also it moved up into World War II. And we need the hydrogen bomb, we need all these bombs, we need all of this other kind of stuff. And the people around here were sold that bill of goods that this was for the war.
It was in this environment of the war effort, TVA shifting from large-scale resource management and regional development to electric production and industrial consumption, that we get the situation at Fontana. TVA had been interested in dams along the Little Tennessee River, but the war effort provided them with an opportunity. Nearby was the Aluminum Company of America, or Alcoa. In 1941, TVA worked out an agreement with Alcoa by which TVA would take possession of the property, they would build Fontana Dam, and then they would dedicate the power produced there to Alcoa, to aluminum production, and also some of that electricity would go to the plant at Oak Ridge, the Manhattan Project site where uranium was enriched. Part of TVA's program was if they built a dam, they had to kind of clear out enough land for the water to back up behind it. And so TVA got into the business of going around and buying up, or in some cases through eminent domain, taking land of people that lived along the river in order to prepare for those hydroelectric dams.
My grandfather had, I forgot how many acres, and the water didn't touch his land, but they were going to stay. So my parents had let me go spend a week with them. So I was standing beside my grandfather in his little overalls. We were carrying water from the spring. And this man came up the road with his big fancy suit on, shook hands with my grandfather and started talking about my grandfather taking the money for the land.
For the most part, TVA was pretty successful at relocating people. TVA would come to your house, they would come to your farm, they would explain what they were doing, they would give you your options. You can sell the farm or you can move. We need this farm for the project. For the most part, families sold the farms.
My grandfather said, we don't want to sell the land, we want to stay because water don't touch it. And that man, he said, we're going to fix a wonderful road and you'll get every foot of your land back. So my grandfather finally reached out in his little trembling hand, he took the check and folded it and put it in a bib of his overalls. My grandfather went in the house and handed my grandmother the check. He said, I accepted the check, but the man told us we'd have to be out before Monday. We moved grandmother and grandpa out on Saturday. And Monday, we went back to see if they'd forgot anything. They'd done burned the house, the barns, every outbuilding and everything.
They had to move because the dam was going to be built and the area flooded. Too bad they tore down all the buildings, getting rid of any evidence that people ever lived there. They did make sure that people wouldn't be coming back there.
They bought more land through eminent domain than they really needed and have never needed it. So in order to justify the purchase of these lands, the National Park Service is trying to build Smoky Mountain National Park. What we will do is just transfer this land to them.
Some people feel that the Tennessee Valley Authority should not have given the 44,000 acres to the Park Service, since it wasn't needed after the dam was built.
When Lake was finished, they gave the land to the park, and we didn't get any money back.
The land was purchased illegally anyway. So now you just add another layer of bureaucracy in trying to get people to get the land back.
We didn't get any land back. We didn't get any money back. We didn't get anything. But I can still go down there now because it's in the park.
They built the road, the portion that is built. The state of North Carolina and the federal government joined together to do that. They built that section together out to the tunnel. And then it stopped, and that's why it's called the Road to Nowhere, because it truly is that. They ended there because they discovered Anakista rock, which leaches an acid into the lake that kills fish. That's what we've always been told. I suppose they can prove there is Anakista rock there and that it is harmful to the lake. But it probably needs to be explored beyond that to satisfy local people that that's the real problem. They would probably like to have just a little bit more proof that that is the case. Locals say, well, roads are built everywhere through these mountains and alongside lakes. And surely there's Anakista rock everywhere.
And a lot of people who supported building the road were not always careful with their facts about the removal. They acted like this was something unique. Well, removal's been taking place since the beginning of time, and it is difficult. And a lot of time it is tragic.
All of this land that was taken illegally, as a Native American, I have to laugh at that. You know, they're still holding a grudge. You know, we had to learn how to get over it a long time ago.
And the removal of the Cherokees from North Carolina and Georgia and Alabama and Tennessee to Oklahoma in the 1830s was tragic, any way you look at it. But it's part of history, and people can survive. Those who get through it can survive.
When the removal came, we had some, what I consider resourceful people who hid out in the mountains. The soldiers, being from urban cities and other places, didn't know how to climb these mountains and find these people, so they didn't. There was a Cherokee by the name of Solid. He and his family were arrested and being moved. They were pushing him, making him move quite fast. His wife was not able to do that. So they were prodding her not with the rifles, but with the bayonets attached to the rifles. They were trying to expedite this whole process. Solly literally tolerated that for as long as he could. And then when they stopped to rest, he just sat with his sons and said, I can't let him do that to my wife. And so he said, when I give you the word, let's jump the soldiers. Well, they did. And in the struggles, they killed 2 of them. The reaction was, we can't find all of these people. These guys killed 2 soldiers. Never mind that our soldiers kill people. They killed 2 soldiers, so we've got to punish them for that, to show people that they can't do that. The Cherokees at this point were so beaten down, they needed a hero. And I can see why Solly became a hero. And the story changed to make Solly that hero, that he surrendered himself, gave up his family, so that the people hiding out in the mountains could stay there.
When we moved out of there, we thought the road would be built, and people thought they would get back to mark the monuments, to take the monuments back. Because during the 30s, people didn't buy monuments because of the Depression. They just couldn't afford it, did well to live. And so a lot of the graves were unmarked. And so they wanted to be sure that they have the road so they could go back and mark the graves.
That North Shore Road that was to be built to replace 288 would provide access back, but they found not only that they wasn't getting access back to those cemeteries, but the cemeteries was being grown up, the park was not taken care of.
They said let all backcountry cemeteries revert back to nature. Well, those were backcountry cemeteries. And so we said, we can't have this. So we decided we're going to organize. When we started, though, there's so many unmarked graves, and so many people wanted to have them marked, they couldn't get back. And some had moved out to, like, California, Washington, Oregon, Arizona. And we thought, well, we're just going to get them all cleaned up, try to preserve it, because this is our history. And this is our heritage, and it just if we lose this, we're losing the first 100 years of our family's life. We decided to meet in 1978 for the first time as a group and go as a big family. My brothers come back from Michigan, and every time they would come back, the first thing they'd do is spend one night at home, then they'd head for Proctor and to the cemetery. So the people had been going, but just one-on-one. Well, we ended up, we didn't have any transportation except small boats because the park wasn't helping us at that time. We were on our own, just get there the best way you could. We asked them for help, they wouldn't help us. We said, well, we tried to get a barge. You have to have Coast Guard approved to go across the lake instead of vehicle crossing. We couldn't get it done. And so we had about 4 or 5 just fishing boats, just regular boats come. We had 150 people. And so they just shuttled them back and forth across the lake till we get to the cemetery and back.
And we've had people this year for decorations from about 18 states in the United States that has never been here, just heard the story. They were going to be here, and they contacted people and have come. They've looked at the web pages, found that window, and just come and wanted to go, just for a free ride over and hear the story and to see it.
And when people want to go to cemeteries, you get in touch and you sign up, and tax dollars are carrying those people to cemetery. I always pay my own way. I go and hire a boat because I think I ought not to charge the taxpayers if I want to go visit my ancestors' gravesite. So I pay. And most of us in the citizens group pay our own way. But those who want to can call the government, and they carry them across the lake to get to the cemetery.
If it comes out where they do not ever build a road, which I hope they'll build a road of some kind. Pray they do. But if it ever boils down to they don't, that our access continues forever.
June the 25th, 1987, Jamie Clark. He introduced it in the House, and Senator Sasser from Tennessee and Al Gore was senator then. in Tennessee, they introduced it in the Senate. I ran for chair of the county commissioners, which was not popular. I was the first woman to be on the commission in the first place. Second place, I was controversial. I supported this bill, and I was an activist. And I hobnobbed around with some environmentalists to get this done. We knew that the people who were opposed to it are going to come en masse, and that's what happened when we did. As an elected official, I took a very unpopular stand with a minority of the people, but they were the vocal minority. Those that were very emotional about it and very passionate about it would show up. The average person on the street just thought, well, commissioners can handle it, we don't need to go. And that's how it is. They couldn't get past Helms because he threatened to filibuster. He maintained that the road should be built, that the government should honor its agreement. Well, nobody disagreed with that, but he was in a position to do something about it and didn't. Finally, the environmentalists backed off of the wilderness bill and said, okay, we'll support you. We'll drop that part and just go for the settlement. It didn't help if Helms still wouldn't. Settlement to him meant building the road. And eventually they came to say, well, we should build the road and give the settlement. No senator or representative on the side supporting the road has ever been able to get a road.
A lot of members of my family and I were walking around at one of the cemeteries in Swain County, paying tribute and honor to our ancestors. My brother Herb, who was a lawyer, then working in Asheville, was walking with me, and he said, Luke, would you be willing to work with me on a little contract matter? And I says, yes, probably. I says, in which county? He says, Swain County. I said, what is the issue? He says, the North Shore Road. I said, oh my goodness. I had heard stories about the road to nowhere, the North Shore Road. But up to that time, I'd never read the contract, which was signed in July of 1943 by Swain County, State of North Carolina, TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, and the U.S. Department of Interior Park Service. I said, before I commit to work with you on this contract, the road to nowhere, I better read the contract. I'd never read it. As a lawyer, I concluded that the contract from July of 1943 was not really enforceable. It was a masterful job on the part of the lawyers for the federal government. But the lawyers for the state of North Carolina and the lawyers for Swain County, in my opinion, got skinned on the contract. When I read that contract, it said this. It said, after hostilities are ended, meaning after World War II is over, after hostilities are ended, the federal government will build a highway along the north shore of Fontana Lake, comma, when Congress appropriates all the money, comma, but in the event Congress does not appropriate the money, it may not be considered a breach of contract. The initial contract was written in July of 1943. From 43 up till the early 80s, there had been 6 or 7 or 8 federal laws passed, any one of which would prohibit building the road. Since the road can't be built, what is the next best thing? It is a substitute performance. It is not perfect, but the road wasn't going to be built. Did the federal government not have an obligation? Yes, and that's what we worked on, and we think, well, it's not perfect, it's better than the alternative of not building. Our posture was not to look at 1 month or 1 year. Our posture is to look 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road and say, what steps can we take with a limited amount of money to improve the quality of life for the people of Swain County 25 and 50 years from now. We knew it was essential. We had to think long term, and the steps we took had to be built on fact, because in any public issue, it's best not to cheat on the facts. Swain County would get the interest only unless 3/4 of the residents of the county voted to touch the principal. Well, we never managed to turn 3/4 of the voters out for an election, so it's unlikely that part will happen. We have suggested, the Citizens for the Economic Future has suggested to the county leaders that they restrict the money to 3 things. Education for our young people, because many young people here don't get college educations, and we want them to. We have suggested they spend it on health care for the elderly. There are large numbers of elderly in the county. And we've suggested they spend it on improving the environment, because with this beautiful county, with a lot of the park here, the water and air are not as pure as they should be. So we want some of the money to be spent improving the environment.
The people on the committee allowed the state to dictate that Swain County would not receive the money, that the state of North Carolina would receive the money, and that Swain County could spend the interest. I don't know what they had to go through to negotiate this, so I just know that they should have put up a heck of a bigger fight than they did for this.
There is no money. Now, you've heard me say this. There is no $52 million. It's a figment of imagination. It's never been appropriated. What we do have is a legal binding contract to build a road.
Right now, we've received $12 million of the original $52 million.
Me, as a individual, want access back to my heritage, to the cemeteries. Me, as a county commissioner, that road is multi-million dollars coming into Swain County every year.
I have worked for a settlement of it. I think it's better to get a cash settlement and concessions than it is to get nothing. And I believe that we will get nothing unless we compromise and take cash and other concessions. That's what I really believe. Otherwise, I would be out there saying, keep your promise and build the road. I really believe it won't ever be built.
So a lot of this doesn't make sense, and so the mind doesn't like a vacuum. It will create whatever it needs to create in order to make sense of this, and anger is one of the offshoots of that.
And diplomacy works in many cases. As a lawyer, I love a good fight. I really enjoy fights. But there are times when a fight does not benefit your client.
It gets to people's anger. They get angry about it. You know, the federal government screwed us over. Well, yes, they did. And if you're not careful, they're going to do it again.
If you can work things out, and if people will be reasonable, you got a far better chance of resolving it. And instead of having a win and a loss, you get a win-win.